I had just finished another exhausting day at work, feeling completely drained and stressed out. All I wanted was to escape the noise of the city and find some peace and quiet in the woods. That's when I decided I would spend the evening by myself bow hunting. I headed home and quickly packed my gear, loading up the truck and drove out to my usual spot. As I pulled into the field and got out of my truck, the cool air filled my lungs, and the weight of the day began to lift off my shoulders. I grabbed my gear and started to hike through the woods, following the path I had taken the week prior to set up some trail cams. But as I walked, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the atmosphere seemed tense, like the air was thick with a foreboding sense of danger. I tried to shrug it off, chalking it up to my stressful day, but my unease only grew stronger as I approached my spot. I decided to set up in a new location, having caught some deer on my trail cams in that area. I set up my blind and settled in for the long wait, hoping to catch some action and clear my head. The night went on slowly, and as the sun began to set, I heard something behind me. At first I got excited, thinking it was an animal, but then I realized it was human. My heart began to race, and I felt a creeping sense of dread wash over me. I tried to tell myself that it was just another hunter, someone like me out here in the woods, but something about the way they were moving made me feel uneasy. I tried to keep still and quiet, hoping they would pass me by, but they kept getting closer and closer. And that's when I heard the sound of a knife being dragged across the blind. I could see a small tear in the fabric, and I knew that whoever was out there wasn't just hunting animals. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out of this situation, but my body was frozen with fear. I could hear their sick, twisted laughter, and my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Suddenly, the fabric of the blind was ripped completely open, and I saw a man standing before me. He was dressed in rags with wild, unkempt hair and a crazed look in his eyes. I could see the glint of a knife in his hand, and I knew that I was in serious trouble. I tried to scramble out of the blind, but he was too fast. He lunged at me with the knife, and I could feel it nicking at my skin as I tried to dodge his attacks. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, and I knew that I had to fight back if I wanted to survive. We grappled on the forest floor, rolling and twisting as we wrestled for control. I could feel the strength of the man, even though he was smaller than me. He was fueled by something beyond reason, something that made him almost inhuman. I managed to wrestle the knife from his hand, and I quickly scrambled to my feet. I held it out in front of me, ready to defend myself if he came at me again, but he just laughed and ran off into the woods, disappearing into the shadows. After the man ran off into the woods, I was left there shaking and terrified. I knew I had to get out of there, so I quickly gathered my gear and ran back to my truck. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the sweat running down my face. I had never felt so scared in my life. I drove back home, still trembling from the encounter. I knew I had to do something, so the next day I went back to check my trail cams. What I saw made my blood run cold. The man had been stalking me all along, following my every move through the woods. He had been watching me set up my blind, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I could see him lurking in the shadows, his wild eyes fixed on me as I went about my business. I knew then that I had been lucky to escape with my life. I never went back to that spot again, and I made sure to always be extra cautious whenever I went out into the woods. The experience had left me shaken and paranoid, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if the man was still out there, waiting for his next victim. My son Ethan had been begging to go hunting for months. He had always been interested in my hunting stories, and the idea of being out in nature, observing the animals, and harvesting his own food fascinated him. So for his 10th birthday, I decided to buy him his own hunting rifle. It was a small .22 caliber rifle, perfect for his size and skill level. As we climbed up the ladder to our tree stand, I could see the excitement in Ethan's eyes. He was eager to see what hunting was all about. I taught him how to safely load and unload his rifle, how to aim, and how to be patient. We waited for hours, watching the deer move through the field below us. We whispered to each other about the different animals we saw, and I shared stories of past hunting trips. As the sun began to set, we started to pack up our gear, disappointed that we hadn't seen any big deer. But then we heard something. It was a faint scream, almost like a little girl's voice, and it was growing louder, coming from deep in the woods. I was confused at first, but then I realized I knew that sound. I had heard other hunters describe it before, but I had never heard it myself. It was a mountain lion. I had read that they can mimic human screams to attract prey, but I didn't think it was possible. I quickly realized that this wasn't a person in trouble. It was a predator, and it was getting closer. "Ethan, we need to get out of here now," I whispered urgently. We lowered ourselves down from the tree stand and began running back towards the truck, but I could hear something large and powerful moving through the woods not far behind us. I knew it was the mountain lion, and it was stalking us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we ran. I kept turning around, trying to catch a glimpse of the predator behind us, but I couldn't see anything in the fading light. I knew that the cat was getting closer, and I could feel my son trembling with fear beside me, so I put my arm around him to comfort him as we ran. I knew that I had to stay calm and think of a way to get us out of this situation. I realized that I had my rifle with me, and that I could use it to fire a warning shot. I quickly raised the gun and fired it in the air while I ran. The sound echoed through the woods, and I could hear the mountain lion stop for a second. It was as if it was assessing the situation, deciding whether to continue the chase or back off. We continued to run, our footsteps pounding on the ground, our breaths ragged. I could hear the mountain lion getting closer again. I knew that we had to do something else to scare it off. I scanned the area for any sign of the mountain lion, to no avail, but I could hear it crashing through the forest behind us, and I knew that it was getting closer by the second. Just as we reached the edge of the woods, I saw a fallen log nearby. Without hesitation, I ran towards it, pulling my son behind me. Just as we reached the edge of the woods, I saw a fallen log nearby. Without hesitation, I ran towards it, pulling my son behind me. I grabbed the log like a weapon and quickly turned to face the mountain lion. The cat was already upon us, its eyes fixed on me, its teeth bared. I knew that I had to act fast, and I swung the log with all my might, hitting the mountain lion in the head. It stumbled back, dazed by the blow. It snarled and growled, but it didn't come any closer. I could see that it was injured, but I knew that it wasn't safe to stick around and find out how badly. I took my son by the hand, and we ran towards the truck as fast as we could. I could hear the mountain lion screaming behind us, but I didn't look back. I knew that we had to keep moving until we were safely inside the truck. We finally made it to the truck, and I fumbled with the keys, my hand shaking with adrenaline. I quickly got inside, locking the doors behind us. I turned on the headlights, and I saw the mountain lion standing at the edge of the woods, its eyes reflecting in the light. I knew that we had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation, and I felt a surge of relief wash over me. I turned to my son, and I saw the fear in his eyes slowly start to dissipate now in the safety of the truck. I thought this experience would push my son away from my beloved hobby, but instead it only made him love it that much more. It has brought us much closer, and we still hunt that same spot to this day. It was the last weekend of deer season, and I was determined to bag myself a big buck. I had been scouting the area for weeks, and I had found the perfect spot in the woods. It was a little off the beaten path, but I had a good feeling about it. I arrived early in the morning, just as the sun was starting to rise. I parked my truck and grabbed my gear. As I hiked into the woods, the only sounds I heard were my own footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. It was peaceful and quiet, just the way I liked it. When I reached my spot, I set up my blind and waited. Hours went by, and I hadn't seen a single deer. I was starting to get frustrated and tired. My stomach was growling, and I had forgotten to bring any food. Just as I was about to give up and head back to my truck, I heard something moving in the brush behind me. My heart raced as I peered out the window of my blind, hoping to catch a glimpse of a big buck. Instead, what I saw was a man in a camouflage suit, carrying a rifle. I was taken aback. I had been so focused on hunting that I hadn't even considered the possibility of encountering another hunter. But why was he walking up to my blind like that? What if he was a poacher? As the man got closer, I could see the expression on his face. It was angry and aggressive. I knew I had to get out of there fast. I tried to quietly gather my gear and sneak away, but the man had already seen me. He started to approach me. My heart was pounding in my chest as I quickly packed up my things and headed back to my truck. I didn't dare look back as I ran through the woods, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I could hear the man behind me shouting and cursing. I didn't know if he was chasing me or not, but I didn't want to find out. Finally, I burst out of the woods and into the open field where my truck was parked. I was panting and sweating, my heart still racing. I looked back towards the woods and saw the man emerge, still carrying his rifle. He stopped and looked in my direction, but didn't move any closer. I got into my truck and started it up, peeling out of the field and onto the road. As I drove away, I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I felt like I was lucky to have made it out of there alive. As I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw the man standing at the edge of the woods, watching me go. I knew I would never forget that encounter, and that I would always be more careful when hunting in the future.